Hello again and welcome. Thank you for joining us in this presentation on infant sleep. My name's Lisa and I'm from InSync with Infants, and we deal with parents, families, particularly of new babies, just helping families interpret what their baby's needs are. So a little disclaimer, this is not intended to replace professional and individual advice. It's designed for broad general educational purposes only. So let's get started. In this presentation, I'm just going to go over some of the general principles about infants and sleep. So the things that I'm going to cover is early tide signs, late tide signs, realistic settling options, and why we discourage settling on your babies on their tummies. So before I get into these principles, just a little bit of information, I guess, about us. We definitely follow attachment parenting principles, and we believe that babies, newborns, are designed to be with their parents for the majority of their day. We also understand that everybody has a different background, different experiences and different expectations, different supports, and we understand that this can influence your experiences with a new baby. We believe that there is not one right answer and that there is not one answer that fits all situations. So we definitely encourage you to listen to your instincts and do what feels right for you in your situation. You will not spoil any babies by cuddling your babies, and babies are designed to be on your chest pretty much for the majority of their life in that first 3 to 4 months while they are immature and while they are showing that startle reflex. The startle reflex is an immature reflex, and it's a way for them to check their surroundings and make sure that they're safe. If they startle and hit something, it usually means that gives them a message that there is something there, there's someone there, there is something to hit, there's something to grab onto. I'm not completely on my own. So once we can understand why babies do what they do, we can then understand what it is that they need from us. So my number one message is do what works for you and do what feels right for you. You will not spoil babies. There is no such thing as spoiling a baby. Babies need cuddles, and that builds that trust and security. So let's get into this and let's see what we can find out. So the other thing is to remember that it is important that interpreting your baby's sleep cues will take time, practice and patience. It's not just sleep cues, it's all the cues that your baby gives you. Feeding cues takes a little bit of practice. When they're needing a cuddle, when they need their nappy change, that will all take practice, and you will become very good at it. It's confusing and difficult initially because you've never done it before, you've never had to do that. So it definitely is one of those things that you're not alone in. It's a common thing for new babies, and new babies teach you to be patient. They need you to be patient, and when you are patient, you'll be rewarded. So you're not expected to be an expert, and not everything works every time. That's normal. So very broadly, about 1 hour of wake time is enough for your baby to cope with. So particularly newborns, it may be less than that. It might be half an hour or 40 minutes, or it might be a little bit longer, but on average about 1 hour of wake time is enough. And that wake time includes the feeding, includes bathing, includes changing their nappies, any activity that you do with them. So initially, when they're very young and very new, it might be that that whole hour is taken up with feeding, and that's normal. That's a normal expectation. What will happen as time goes on is that the feeding will become more efficient and will take up less time, and by the time your baby's 3 to 4 months old, you'll probably find that feeding will take up 10 to 20 minutes, and the rest of the time is wake time and play time and interactive time. So it will seem like they're awake for longer, but in fact they won't be awake for longer. It's just that they get more efficient and you get more efficient with the feeding and everything else that you do with them. The other thing to know is that even by about 6 months, they still will only handle being awake for around about 1.5 hours. You might get 2 hours out of them, but on average it's about 1.5 hours of wake time, and then they'll need to sleep again. So as soon as you see the tide signs, and that's the early signs, that's the cue for your baby to have a sleep and for you to sort of put them wherever you're wanting, whatever you're doing for sleep. If that's cuddling them to sleep, that's fine, but if you're wanting them to be in their cot, then that's the cue to take action. So the early tide signs is the first whinge, the first yawn. They're avoiding looking at you, or they're staring off into space. They might start frowning or screwing up their faces, and one of the main ones is you'll see by their arm and leg movements, particularly their arm movements. When they're quite relaxed, you'll see that their hands are open and their arms and hands are away from their body, and their movements are very smooth, very calm, very coordinated. Once they're starting to get tired, their arm movements become quite jerky and uncoordinated, and their arms come in close to their body and their hands form into fists. So when you see that change, that's your early cue for your baby telling you that they're getting tired and they need to have some time out. If you look at your baby's face and only go by their face, you may find that you'll miss these early tired signs, and they'll go from looking like they're okay to being really happy and crying and cranky very quickly. So you need to look at their whole body, you need to look at all of their cues to see what they're up to and to see what they need from you. So late tide signs, if you miss the early tide signs, if you see any of these things, it's a sure sign that, yep, you've missed the early tide signs. So if they're just cranky and they're crying and they're needing to be held all the time, you can't put them down even for 5 seconds. They've got red eyes, they're rubbing their eyes, nothing helps to console them, they're just absolutely beyond it. And one of the things also is that they'll have repetitive arm and leg movements. So usually what I'll see is one leg will just be moving repeatedly up and down. It'll be like a pumping action, and with all of some of these things, they may still look happy, or they still may look quite reasonably okay, but any of these signs, any time you see any of these things, your baby is overtired generally. So they usually need help to go to sleep. The difference between early tide signs and late tide signs is that if you catch the early tide signs, your baby does have a very good opportunity to go to sleep on their own without you having to do anything for them. That's why we really want you to know about the early and late tide signs, so that it's a calm transition, and sleep can be very calm. With late tide signs, there is no chance that your baby's going to sleep on their own. They need you to feel better. Babies are very immature and they can't regulate themselves to feeling good. They know that they need you to help them feel good. And when they're tired, the only thing that's going to make them feel good is sleep. They need you to help them get the sleep because they can't do it on their own. So that's why we talk about early tide signs and late tide signs. And even when you get really practiced at catching the early tide signs and sleep does go well, there may be times where it just doesn't come together, and that's normal. That's just life. You're not doing anything wrong necessarily, and life happens. Sometimes you go to the toilet and you've missed the tide signs. Somebody comes to the door and you miss the tide signs. You're out and you miss the tide signs. There's lots of different scenarios, and that is normal. All you can do is your best and just practice as much as you can by trying to catch them. So I hope that helps a little bit with the early and late tide signs. So remember, babies get overstimulated very quickly due to their immaturity and short attention span, and the time frame between early tide signs and late tide signs can be as short as 10 or 15 minutes. So that's why we say when you see the first early tide sign, it's time to take action. That's your baby telling you that, hey, I'm getting ready, I'm really needing to have some time out, I really need a rest now. And if you just prolong it for just that little bit too long, sometimes it can just all go pear-shaped. So some babies generally need some sleep between most feeds of the day, and when we're talking about small babies, we're generally talking about newborns, but even up until 3 to 4 months of age. They may have times in the day where they don't have a sleep between feeds, and as long as they're happy, you're happy, they're calm, they're relaxed, everything's okay. It is not something to be worried about. Remember that quiet time and calm time can be just as therapeutic as sleep for us as well. Sometimes if we just have a little quiet sit down or a little quiet lay down, that can be just as therapeutic as sleep for us sometimes and give us enough energy to keep going. It's the same for your babies. As long as they're okay, as long as they're happy, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong and there's nothing to worry about and get worked up about. If they're quite happy, then that's okay. So your job as a parent is to provide the environment that enhances sleep. You can't make your baby sleep. That's your baby's job. It's the same as everything. Your job is to provide the opportunity. Their job is to do the sleeping or whatever it is that we wanted to do. So if you want to Cuddle your baby to sleep, by all means, cuddle your baby to sleep. You're not going to wreck them. Small babies need lots of cuddling, and that's how they learn to trust you. So it's not a wrong thing. A lot of parents, I'd say the majority of parents, do a combination. The times when their babies can self-settle, they'll let their baby self-settle. The times where it's harder, then they help them and they give them a cuddle and they put them in the pouch or the sling or something else to help them go off to sleep. So remember that when babies are overtired, they feel crappy and cranky, and it's a bit like us. When we're overtired, we don't feel relaxed, we're all uptight. So some things that you can do to help them relax, if it's really going pear-shaped and you're just not sure what's going on and nothing seems to work, a nice warm relaxing deep bath can be really calming. And remember that it needs to be quite warm, and it's a relaxing bath, so it's not about getting them in and out of the bath really quickly. It's a long, slow bath, 5 to 10 minutes possibly. And if you are using this as a tool to relax them, then try and make the air in the room wherever you're giving them the bath quite warm as well, because as soon as you take them out of warm water into cold air, they're going to protest because they'll be uncomfortable. So just a couple of little tips there. Another way to help them relax is really just to wrap them really firmly with their arms contained within the wrap. They judge their environment with their arms, so if their arms are just going all around and they're just really got nothing firm against their arms, they're not going to settle. Their arms is their gauge of their environment, and if there's something firm there for them to push against, they'll calm down much quicker. So if you hold him close into mum or dad's chest quite firmly, not like a vice, but firmly, don't have them too loose, and you always need to support the back of their neck and the back of their sort of chest, their head, then that will give them a nice firm feeling and help give them security as well. It will still take some time. It's not going to be a quick, blink and they're going to be calm. It will take some time. Singing to them in a nice lulling tune works well, but it's proven that parents' voices singing helps calm their babies, and talking in a quiet monotone also helps, and that can be about anything at all. The thing to help you feel calm and relaxed, because remember that your babies take their cues from you and they will feel your anxiety if you're anxious. So a way to help you stay calm is to walk around the house or the yard calmly and rhythmically. This is with your baby in your arms or in a pouch or a sling. It's because it's that quiet, calm movement that also helps. So it might be that you do a number of things. You put them in the pouch, or you cuddle them, hold them in close to you, you're walking, and you might be talking or singing to them as well. So you might be doing a number of things, but try and make them calm and soothing actions. Often when we're trying to comfort or calm a really anxious baby or a baby that's really upset, is we see people jiggling their babies up and down, and so sometimes that can actually make them more overstimulated, and that can actually take much longer for them to calm down. Remember that if they're overtired, their senses are overstimulated as well, and they just need to shut down and have some time out. So if we're jiggling them up and down quite vigorously, it might actually be adding to their stimulation. So that's the idea of swaying and gently rocking and walking calmly, is that it's calming and gentle actions, and that's what we need to do to help calm them. And from a realistic point of view, so that you know what's realistic, it may take 20 to 30 minutes for them to calm down, another 10 to 15 minutes for them to relax, and another 10 to 15 to go to sleep. So it is a time-consuming exercise, and you do need to be patient, and this is normal. You're not doing anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with your baby. This is normal. It's the thing to expect. But as we were saying, if you can catch the tide signs early, then you'll bypass this. That's the whole point of catching early tide signs, is that you bypass this long-winded, lengthy procedure for helping them to calm down and go to sleep. It takes practice, it takes perseverance, and you need to be patient. Babies are a really good tool for teaching us patience. They need you to be patient. So this is realistic. You can't expect them to settle after 5 minutes. So if whatever you're doing isn't working after 5 minutes, don't just then go and change it. Persevere. Persevere, because it does take 20 to 30 minutes for them to calm. So sometimes a background white noise, refrigerator, fan, music, air conditioner can give a lulling effect, and sometimes that's all that babies need, that little background bit of noise, just to give them that security and comfort that there's something there. So it also it gives them that security and comfort, but it also masks big changes in noise levels. So remember, in the uterus there was constant noise. It's noisy in there and it's constant. And so sometimes when they come out, if it's quite quiet in their environment, sometimes they actually think that there's something wrong because it's too quiet. So it can work really well to help calm them. Another thing to be aware of is that babies are noisy, and they will squirm and grunt and groan and be sort of noisy to go off to sleep. Some of them will even have a little bit of a cry as a normal transition to go off to sleep. So it doesn't necessarily mean that anything is wrong, and it is sometimes hard to get your head around babies going off to sleep without any crying. They will do it, but a little bit of crying, a low-level cry, can be a normal part of going off to sleep. We're not talking about distress and leaving them for hours and them being distressed. We're just talking about a low-level whingy type of cry. It's common that babies will do that just to go off to sleep. It's often more noticeable at night just because it is quieter, and usually we're lying there just listening, whereas during the day you're usually doing other things and you're preoccupied. Your brain is preoccupied even if your body is not preoccupied. Oops. So going to them and attending to them where they are lying or sitting is responding to them as well. So with attachment parenting principles, one of the basics is that your baby's needs are met in a timely manner and that you respond timely. They don't have to work to get your attention and to get their needs met. So we're all for responding to them timely, and remember that picking them up is responding to them, but you don't always have to pick them up to respond to them. Sometimes responding to them is really just going over to them and putting your hand on them, giving them a bit of a pat, a bit of a stroke, talking to them, shushing them, whatever it is. Sometimes all they want is to know that you're near, and that's okay. By all means, if you need to pick them up, pick them up. But if you don't, then that's okay as well. And there will be times when your baby can do it on their own, and that's fine. We definitely encourage to allow them to do that. You're not being a bad parent. If it's all okay, then that's fine. Definitely, if you need to help them further, by all means, help them further and pick them up and soothe them and calm them and do all that type of stuff. So tummy sleeping. Thankfully, with the SIDS organisation that was developed in the mid-80s, I believe, most people know that tummy sleeping is one of the biggest precursors to SIDS, which is sudden infant death syndrome. So since we've known to put babies to sleep on their back, that it's a safer position for babies to sleep, we have significantly reduced the number of SIDS deaths that have occurred. It's also interesting to know that a lot of the primitive societies in the world instinctively sleep their babies on their backs, and when they're questioned they say that babies die when they're sleeping on their tummy. So it's obviously a very common known thing. Unfortunately, in the Western world we sometimes think we know better when we take the easy way out and cause all these problems inadvertently, but we're coming back on track now, so that's a good thing to know. So tummy sleeping is discouraged. Part of that is babies will settle well on their tummy, and remember I was talking about the startle reflex, and they can't startle if they're on their tummy. That's because their arms can't, their arms are against a firm surface, so if they can't startle they generally don't wake up, they feel quite safe. So that's one aspect. Another aspect why we really discourage tummy sleeping is that you've got your windpipe and your food pipe, and if we're looking at people front on, at the front is the windpipe and behind it is the food pipe. So if babies are lying on their tummy and they vomit, it's highly more likely that fluid can go into their windpipe rather than staying in their food pipe. If they're on their back, their food pipe is lowest, so if they vomit it can go to where it's meant to be. Having said that, there is no documented evidence of babies choking on their vomit when they're lying on their back. They seem to have the ability to be able to manage that quite well. So one of the parents being scared that babies will vomit and choke on their vomit is an unfounded fear. The SIDS people have looked into that and researched that, and that's their findings. So yes, babies will settle well on their tummy, and if you're watching them, then that's your call and your choice. However, the recommendations that have well-founded research are saying that put them on their backs to sleep. Of course, if you're cuddling them to sleep and they're with you for sleep, if they're on your chest and they're in your arms, then they may be upright, and that's quite okay as well. If you're not around them and they're on their tummies, that's when the highest risk is. When they're starting to roll and they're moving in their sleep and they're choosing their own positions, then absolutely, if they choose to tummy sleep, then that's their choice and they can get into and out of that position on their own. So older babies, when they choose to do that, that's okay. It's the younger babies when they can't move freely and purposefully. So thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. I hope that's been helpful and has given you some food for thought with infants and sleep. There is many aspects of infants and sleep. This is just a little bit of an overview of some of the main points to help you achieve easy sleep with your babies. So if you have any comments, please contact us at insyncwithinfants.com. If you have any requests for future presentations, by all means, see us there as well. Thank you.